Can't see nothing in front of me. Can't see nothing coming up behind. Make my way through the darkness. Can't feel nothing but this chain that binds me. Lost track of how far I've gone. How far I've gone, how high I've climbed. On my back's a 60-pound stone. On my shoulder, a half-mile line. Come on up for the rising. Come on up, lay your hands in mine. Come on up for the rising. Come on up for the rising tonight. I left my home this morning. Bells were ringing, they filled the air. Wearing the cross of my calling. On wings of fire, I keep rolling down here. Come on up for the rising. Come on up, lay your hands in mine. Come on up for the rising. Come on up for the rising tonight. I see you, Mary, in the garden of 1,000 sighs, holding pictures of your children. On wings of fire, I come rolling down here. Come on up for the rising. Come on up, sky of tears, sky of glory and sadness, sky of mercy, sky of fear, sky of longing and emptiness, sky of fullness, sky of blessed light. Come on up for the rising. Come on up for the rising tonight.
Friends, our reading this morning is the story of Easter as told in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. And as you listen to the story this morning, I want to invite you to listen with a curious heart and with fresh ears, and to perhaps consider two things. Consider that the passage that I'll share with you is just a few verses long, yet it's the entirety of Mark's account of Easter morn. And consider, too, that these verses are the very last verses in the book of Mark, at least according to the oldest manuscripts of Mark. These are the very last verses. It's how his gospel ends. So with these things in mind, I invite you to hear then the Easter story. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint Jesus' body. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb. But when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be afraid. You were looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He's not here. Look, there is the place that they laid him. Go, tell his disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." So the women went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. But they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Here ends our reading. Mark's account of Easter morning stands apart from all the other Gospels. It stands apart in ways that I find striking and surprising. You see, by definition, a gospel is a story about good news. That's what the word gospel means, good news. At the risk of oversimplifying things, a gospel is a story with a happy ending, right? And in the Bible, the happy ending is Easter. And in all the other accounts of Easter in the Bible, those attributed to Matthew, Luke, and John, they remain true to this gospel form. In their Easter stories, the women not only find Jesus' tomb empty, but they go back and they tell all the other disciples what they've witnessed. And they're all amazed. And then Jesus appears to some or all of them so that they can see for themselves that he is indeed arisen, that he's okay. And then he explains to them, and by extension us, what has happened and what it all means and why it's good news. And that's the happy ending. But not Mark. Mark is different. Mark refuses to wrap up his story in a nice Easter bow. He allows a difficult story to remain difficult and messy and ambiguous. I mean, do we have a resurrection here or not? Sure, the tomb is empty and a man inside claims that Jesus has risen, but the women don't quite believe him. And given everything their friend has suffered, they have good reason to fear his body might have met a different fate, been stolen or desecrated. And in the very last line of the gospel, the very last line of this good news story, right where we should be getting our happy ending, we find Jesus' friends mute with fear and confusion. They flee the tomb, quote, "for terror and amazement had seized them, but they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." End of story. That's where Mark's gospel ends. They were afraid. What are we to make of this Easter story? What are we to make of Mark's strange good news? Friends, it just may be that Mark's is an Easter story made for a time such as this. Now, our time. A time when people have been silenced, right, by fear and confusion. A time when, like the women at the tomb, people we love and care about are being unjustly targeted and punished by the state. A time when some of our friends and neighbors are not where they're supposed to be when we go looking for them. Instead, they've been snatched, not from a tomb, but from the very streets of this city. Maybe Mark's is an Easter for this very moment. Because Easter is also the story of a capricious ruler who, in cahoots with a capricious mob, metes out state violence on a whim. This morning's reading didn't include the events of Good Friday, but let's not forget them. Let's not forget how on Good Friday the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, takes Jesus and a criminal named Barabbas, both sentenced to death, and places them before a large crowd and gives the crowd the opportunity to free just one. The one with the loudest applause is saved, is spared. The crowds cheer for Barabbas, and Pilate asks mockingly, "What, you don't want me to free Jesus? He seems like a nice guy." And the crowd shouts, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Mob justice, justice as caprice, justice as whim. Maybe this is an Easter story for our times. For this moment, like the women at the tomb, we don't know what to make of the events we're witnessing all around us. We don't know what the signs portend. We don't yet know how this story, our story, ends. Is it a gospel? Is it a good news story, or is it a nightmare? And so I, for one, am grateful this Easter that Mark has written a complicated gospel. A complicated gospel for a complicated time, a complicated gospel in which I can find myself and my troubled feelings. And I take some comfort, some consolation from what I take to be Mark's message to us, which is that sometimes, even when we're in the midst of a good news story, it doesn't always feel that way. It sure didn't feel that way to the women at the tomb. Sometimes, even in the midst of a good news story, we can feel frightened, silenced, confused. But that doesn't mean the story won't end well. It just means the story's not over yet. In fact, maybe the Easter story is just the beginning of the good news story. Maybe Easter morning is not the end of a resurrection story, but the beginning of one. The beginning of a good news story, our good news story. You know, that's what the great Salvadoran martyr and theologian Oscar Romero believed. I've loved what Archbishop Romero has to say about Easter. Listen to what he says. I'm paraphrasing him just slightly, but essentially he says, Easter is a story of Jesus who died as a man but was resurrected as a people. A people who tried their best to live by his example and according to his love and justice. That's, for Romero, what resurrection is. For Romero, you see, Easter morning is just the beginning of the resurrection, just the beginning of the good news, but the proof is in the people. And each and every community, in each and every time, he taught, needs to discover what the resurrection means and looks like for them. What is the resurrection that we desperately seek in this time? Friends, the world cries out for us to be Easter people. To be people of justice and love. Because let's face it, if you look around, it feels a whole lot like we're living in a Good Friday world. Okay? A world of suffering and injustice and death. A world littered with crosses. The cross of injustice and dehumanization, the cross of authoritarianism, the cross of hatred and division, of environmental degradation. So many crosses. But in a Good Friday world, we can choose to be Easter people. People who in a dark time are still able to see that bright morning star arising. People who put their shoulder to the rock and roll that stone away from the tomb. Easter people in a Good Friday world. That's what we're called to be. Jesus died as a man, said Archbishop Romero, but was resurrected as a people. It's like from he, him to we, us, right? Those are our Easter pronouns, we, us. We, the people, the Easter people, the people of the resurrection, right? You know, I'm reminded that the word resurrection literally, thank you, Alder, literally means a rising up. In other words, a resurrection is an uprising, right? And if that's true, then I've been seeing signs lately of a coming resurrection. I witnessed it yesterday at the rallies that took place in state capitals all across the nation. It was like Easter came a day early. I saw it with so many of you on the Boston Common 2 weeks ago at that hands-off rally. I've witnessed it as institutions like the one across the street slowly find their courage and stand firm for their values. As judges hold fast to the law, and as all of us collectively find our voice, resurrection, insurrection, a rising up, an uprising, call it what you will. What it means is that your salvation is bound up with mine and with that of everyone else. It means that the only way we'll escape the tomb and see the light of Easter morn is if we all put our shoulders on that stone and push, friends, push. Earlier, the choir sang to us that beautiful song, The Rising. They sang to us, come on up for the rising. Come on up, lay your hand in mine. That song, The Rising, was Bruce Springsteen's hymn for the people of New York in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks. His prayer for those who died, for their rising, and a prayer for those who lived, who survived, and whose task it was to raise up all that had been devastated. A prayer for the doctors and nurses, first responders, everyone. It's a hymn to the resurrection of a people and a place. And in this sense, I count it an Easter hymn. And so this, then, is our Easter invitation, friends. Come on up for the rising. Come on up, lay your hand in mine. Lay your hand in mine because your salvation is bound up with mine. Lay your hand in mine because none of us can do this alone. Lay your hand in mine because Easter is about the resurrection, not of a person, but of a people. We, the people, and Easter people, we, us, our Easter pronouns together, we can help write the next chapter of our good news story. So, alleluia, friends, and amen, and happy Easter.